I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president's son tried to take my truck by stealing my key signal. And his excuse, he said his mom said it was fine since she runs the HOA. Funny thing is, the only thing that was fine that night was them lying to the police with the state attorney listening in. But let me start from the beginning. My truck is a 1999 Ford F-150. Her name is Betty. She's not a show truck. Her paint is a gloss black, chipped in places from gravel roads and the occasional dropped wrench. The driver's seat has a worn spot the exact shape of me. I rebuilt her engine myself piece by piece in the two-car garage that smells of oil and metal and contentment. Last winter, I added an aftermarket remote start keyless kit with a bypass ring so Deborah could warm her up from the house. She's honest. She's reliable. She's mine. And Karen Spruce, the newly crowned queen of our homeowners association, had decided Betty was an eyesore. More than that, she'd decided Betty would be the perfect 16th birthday present for her son, Ryan. She told me as much over the picket fence a week ago, her smile as wide and thin as a razor blade. I told her politely that Betty wasn't for sale. Her smile didn't falter. It just got colder. That afternoon, she filmed my truck, dialed 911, and told the operator I was harassing her at the fence. A patrol car took a report and left. That call would matter later. The officer had split us like kindergartners. "Ma'am, please a step back from the fence." Karen smiled for his body cam. "He's hostile about a truck." I lifted my hands. I was washing it. The cop handed me a card. "Incident numbers on there, Mr. Miller. If she calls again, it stacks." Karen's smile twitched. "Good," she said loud enough for the camera. "Because I care about standards." I filed the number in my head next to her name. That's why on a Tuesday evening, with the sky bleeding orange and purple, I was standing in my driveway with two police officers, watching one of them steal my truck without ever touching a key. Officer Davis was a tall man built like a retired linebacker with a slow way of speaking that made you listen closely. His partner, Officer Reed, was younger, leaner, and moved with a nervous energy. They'd come out as a community outreach thing, a response to a small string of high-tech car thefts in the next town over. "It's called a relay attack, Tim," Davis said, holding up a small black box. It looked like an old portable radio. Thieves work in pairs. One guy gets the amplifier near your house. He walks the perimeter, searching for a signal. He nodded toward our front door. On the little table just inside, my key sat in a ceramic bowl Deborah made in a pottery class. That aftermarket module is always listening for its remote. Thieves boost that weak ping and bounce it to a second box by the door. Miller stood by Betty's driver's side door, holding a second, smaller box, the relay transmitter. The amplifier, Davis continued, his voice a low rumble, picks up that faint signal from your keys inside. It boosts it, sends it to the second box his partner is holding next to your vehicle. The truck thinks the key is right there in his hand. As if on cue, the lock on Betty's door gave a soft metallic thunk. Miller opened the door, slid inside, and hit the remote start sequence on the add-on harness. The engine came to life with a familiar, healthy roar. My engine, my truck, stolen in 10 seconds of absolute silence. I felt a cold knot tighten in my gut. It was the same feeling I'd get on the carrier right before a night launch. A mix of adrenaline and icy calm. My son Phil stood on the porch, his arms crossed. At 16, he was already taller than me, with a quiet intelligence in his eyes. He watched everything, processed everything. He didn't miss a beat. "They don't need the key at all?" he asked, his voice steady. "Not even to drive away?" Davis shook his head, motioning for Miller to kill the engine. "Once it's running, it'll run until the tank is empty or they shut it off. By then, it's in a shipping container or a chop shop. The new ones are even worse, fully digital. These older models, like Betty here," he patted her fender, "they have some analog quirks. That can be a blessing." My wife Deborah came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "She's the rock. I'm the engine. She's the frame that holds it all together." She'd been a signals analyst in the Navy, same as me, but she'd made a career of it in the private sector. Data, patterns, signals. That was her world. She looked from the truck to the officers, her brow furrowed. "So the only defense is to block the signal," she stated, not asked. "A Faraday box for your keys," Davis confirmed. "Basically a little metal cage, or you can wrap them in tin foil. But that gets old." Tommy wandered up the sidewalk wearing a ball cap and holding actual tin foil. Question: if I wrap my whole minivan, do I get better mileage or just neighbors? Davis didn't blink. Just neighbors. Karen's SUV rolled by slow. Phone held high like a periscope. She didn't wave. She filmed a long, steady shot of Betty in my face, then the officers, then drove on. Miller watched her taillights. She's subtle like a marching band. Deborah clicked her tongue. We'll need the pouch tonight. We bag the real fobs, Deborah said, and park a decoy remote in the cookie tin with the lid cracked. Just enough leak to bait their relay. Cameras get everything. Davis tapped his card on my palm again. And if your marching band comes back after midnight, call. He leaned closer. We already flagged your case to the state attorney's intake. Prelim file open. If it pops tonight, then investigators on call. Deborah arched a brow. So we call you, you call them? Davis nodded, already on the thread. I ran a hand over Betty's hood. The metal was still warm from the day's sun. I'd spent hundreds of hours with my head under this hood, my hands covered in her grease. She wasn't just a machine. She was a project, a history, a part of the family. The thought of some punk kid with a black box taking her from me in the dead of night made my blood run cold. Karen Spruce's words echoed in my head. Ryan just adores it. He loves that classic rugged look. It would be so perfect for him. She'd said it with such casual, absolute entitlement, as if my ownership was just a temporary inconvenience. It wasn't a question of if she would try something. It was a question of when. Her son's birthday was in 2 weeks. The clock was ticking. I looked at Davis. What happens when it's not random? What happens when you know who's coming for it? Officer Davis's expression hardened slightly. The community outreach cop was gone, replaced by a veteran officer who'd seen the ugly side of neighborly disputes. He looked over at the Spruce house. A 2-story beige monster with too many gables, perfectly manicured lawn, and a giant passive-aggressive welcome sign. Then it's not just Grand Theft Auto, he said, his voice low. It's personal, and personal gets messy. You get video, you get license plates, you get anything you can, and you call us before you do something you'll regret. He handed me his card. Call my cell directly if something feels off. Anything. Davis leaned closer, voice low. We'll stage an unmarked 3 blocks out. No lights. We won't cross your lawn unless you call. If she dials 911 on you again, dispatch knows the history. He glanced at the Spruce place. She plays official. We play documented. I took the card, the small piece of paper feeling heavy in my hand. It was a promise of help, but it was also a warning. The demonstration was over, but for me, the lesson was just beginning. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that Karen Spruce wouldn't be hiring professionals. She'd be arrogant enough to think she could get her own son to do it, and I'd be ready. That night after the police left, our house transformed. It wasn't a home anymore. It was an observation post. My years in the Navy taught me one thing above all else. You don't wait for the enemy to act. You prepare the battlefield. You control the engagement. Deborah was in her element, orchestrating our digital defenses from the kitchen table, which now looked like a command center. Her laptop was open, displaying a 4-panel grid of video feeds. Ring camera is live and recording on motion, she said, tapping a key. I've boosted its sensitivity. It'll catch a squirrel twitching. The dash cam in your truck is set to parking mode. It'll buffer a constant 30-second loop and save on impact or sound. I've also activated the audio recording. She pointed to a small magnetic black box, no bigger than a pack of gum. And this little guy is a GPS tracker. I've tucked it up inside the frame, well away from the OBD2 port where they'd look for one. Its battery is good for 3 weeks, and it pings us its location every 60 seconds. She was calm, focused, a master of her craft. This was her world, a world of invisible signals and data streams, and she navigated it with an ease that always amazed me. She was the best analyst I'd ever known, and right now she was working to protect our family. Phil was at the workbench in the garage. He wasn't building a model car or fixing his bike. He was carefully, methodically installing a hidden kill switch in Betty. It was a simple toggle, a throwback to an earlier era of car security. But it was brutally effective. I had sketched out the schematic for him on a napkin. We were wiring it directly to the fuel pump relay, flipped the switch, and the engine would be starved of gasoline. It wouldn't just shut off, it would die quietly and completely. The trick was the placement. We ran the wire through the firewall under the carpet and up into the center console. The switch itself was hidden inside the empty casing of an old cassette tape I'd stuck in the tape deck. It looked like junk, a forgotten relic. No one would ever think to touch it. Phil's hands were steady, his movements precise. He didn't talk much, but he absorbed everything. He understood the mechanics of it, the simple, elegant logic of the circuit. He was a good kid, smart and capable. It made me sick that he had to spend his evening fortifying our property against a greedy neighbor. I should have been doing homework or playing video games, not preparing for a crime. My job was simpler. I was on watch. I sat in the darkened living room, a pair of old Navy binoculars in my lap, watching the spruce house. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow that felt like a lie. I could see their silhouettes moving behind the curtains. Karen, her son Ryan, her husband, who always looked vaguely bewildered. They looked like a normal family, but I knew better. I knew that behind that facade, a plan was likely being hatched. A plan to take what was mean. I thought back to my conversation with Karen. It had started innocently enough. She'd caught me while I was washing Betty in the driveway. "That's a fine old truck," she'd said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's got character." I'd thanked her. That's when she made her pitch. "You know, my Ryan is turning 16 soon. He's such a good boy. He deserves something special, something solid like that." She gestured to Betty. "I'd be willing to give you a fair price." Blue book. Of course, I just shook my head. "I appreciate the offer, Karen, but she's not for sale." "Sentimental value." Her face had tightened, the pleasant mask slipping for just a second. "Everything has a price, Tim. It's an old truck. It's loud. Frankly, it brings down the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Selling it to me would be a win-win." That washer mistake. She'd insulted Betty. More than that, she'd insulted me, my work, my home. She saw my life as something to be managed, curated to her taste. I lowered the binoculars. The whole situation felt absurd. This was a quiet suburban street, not a war zone. We were supposed to be arguing about crabgrass and garbage can placement, not preparing for a felony. My comic relief neighbor Tommy had driven by earlier, giving me a cheerful wave from his minivan. He was a good guy, completely oblivious, probably worried about his fantasy football lineup. I envied him. I envied his normally. Deborah's voice came soft but clear through the walkie-talkie I had clipped to my shirt. We weren't using phones for communications. Too easy to trace. And the light from the screen was a giveaway. "Anything?" she asked. "All quiet on the Western Front," I murmured back. "They're watching a movie." "Looks like Stay Sharp," she said. "People get brave when they think everyone else is asleep." She was right. The quiet hours, the ones just after midnight, were when the world got weird. I settled deeper into the armchair, the worn leather cool against my skin. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. The binoculars felt heavy in my lap. I was a mechanic, a husband, a father. I wasn't supposed to be running a midnight stakeout in my own living room, but Karen Spruce had pushed. She had threatened my peace, my property, my family sense of security, and I was about to push back. Waiting's hard. The Navy taught me how. I watched the sleeping houses and kept my eyes on the enemy. I didn't know if it would be tonight, but my gut told me it would be soon, and when they came, we'd be ready. The trap was set. All we needed was for the mice to take the bait. Midnight dragged. A gust rattled the maple leaves like coins. Our sprinklers coughed awake, and I nearly jumped out of my skin before remembering I'd set them to off. Deborah whispered in my earpiece. False alarm. Front sensor blip. Trash panda near Tommy's cans. On cue. A raccoon waddled past the porch cam like a tiny burglar in a fur coat. Phil crackled on the family channel. "Charge him by the hour, right?" I said. "College fund rate." The house settled again. Headlights washed our living room, then clicked off. A sedan idled at the stop sign. Bass thumping. Dead then gone. Deborah counted in my ear. 2 sets of steps on sidewalk. Pause at our gate. Testing latch. I stood halfway from my chair without meaning to. Metal rattled once. Then a cat exploded from the hedge. My heart tried to leave the building. Phil texted, "Build a cat." Deborah itemized. I sank back down, breathing even. The air got thin, like the night was holding a note only I could hear. Somewhere down the block, a TV clicked off. A bedroom light died. The street exhaled. I could feel my pulse in my fingers and forced my breathing slow. 4 counts in, 4 counts out until the neighborhood held its breath. And I heard the soft scrape of shoes on the sidewalk that weren't mine. The digital clock on the cable box glowed 1:47 a.m. The world outside was still and silent, bathed in the pale, watery light of a half moon. Most of the houses on our street were dark, their occupants lost in sleep. It's a vulnerable time, those deep hours of the night. It's when you believe you're safest and when you're often the most exposed, the walkie-talkie on my hip crackled to life. Deborah's voice, a hushed, urgent whisper. Tim movement. North side of the street, 2 houses down. 2 figures, hoodies up. I raised the binoculars, my heart starting a slow, heavy drum beat against my ribs. I didn't need to see them. I knew, my body knew. This was it. Through the lenses, the blurry shapes sharpened into 2 people. They were sticking to the shadows, moving with a clumsy sort of stealth that screamed amateur. One was taller, lankier, the other shorter, more compact. They're crossing the street now, Deborah reported, her voice as steady as a surgeon's. Heading for the Martins' yard, using the hedges for cover. I watched them, my breath held tight in my chest. They were doing exactly what Officer Davis had described. One person, the one with the amplifier, would hang back, circling the house to find the key signal. The other with the relay box would approach the target vehicle. They've split up, Deborah said. Taller one is moving along our fence line. The other is heading straight for the driveway, straight for Betty. My hands were steady on the binoculars. My breathing was even. The training kicks in. You don't panic, you observe, you analyze, you act. I could see the shorter figure more clearly now. He was holding a small box just like the one Officer Reed had used. It was Ryan, Karen's son, a 16-year-old kid in a dark hoodie about to commit a felony because his mother told him he deserved my truck. The other figure, the taller one, had to be a friend he'd roped into it. A lookout or maybe the one holding the amplifier. Phil, stay put, I whispered into my walkie-talkie. No matter what you hear, you understand? A quiet yes, Dad came back instantly. He was a good kid. He would listen. I trusted him. I focused back on Ryan. He was at Betty's driver's side door now, fumbling with the relay box. He looked nervous, glancing around, his movements jerky. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a scared kid doing something stupid and dangerous. A soft thunk echoed in the silent night air. It was a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. The sound of Betty's door unlocking. Dory's open, Deborah confirmed in my ear. He's inside. I watched as the truck's interior light flicked on for a moment, illuminating Ryan's face, pale and strained before he shut the door, plunging it back into darkness. A few seconds passed. It felt like an eternity. Then Betty's engine coughed to life. The sound was a violation, a punch to the gut. It was my truck, my work, being started by a thief in my own driveway. But there was no lurch, no squeal of tires. They were being smart, or trying to be. The truck began to roll slowly and silently down the slight incline of my driveway. No headlights, just a ghost of a machine drifting toward the street. They were planning a soft roll, letting gravity do the work until they were far enough away to turn on the lights and drive normally. It was a decent plan for a couple of amateurs. But they hadn't planned on me. They hadn't planned on Phil. They hadn't planned on a simple cassette tape in an old tape deck. I let the truck clear the driveway. I let it roll about 20 ft down the asphalt of the street, putting it directly under a streetlight and in perfect view of the ring camera and the dash cam. Let them feel like they were getting away with it. Let the confidence build. Confidence makes you sloppy. I raised the second walkie-talkie, the one connected to the receiver I'd placed in the garage. Now, Phil, I said, my voice low and calm. In the garage, I knew Phil would be holding a small remote I'd rigged. It was a simple garage door opener, but I'd rewired it. It sent a unique radio frequency to a receiver connected to the kill switch. It was my ass in the hole. I didn't have to be in the truck. I could kill the engine from 100 ft away. There was a faint click from the walkie-talkie. And out on the street, Betty died. One brief cough, then dead silent. The engine cut out instantly. The power steering vanished, and the 2-ton vehicle rolled to a gentle, perfect stop right in the middle of the road. The switch starved the fuel pump. No drama, just a quiet coast and dead engine. The trap had been sprung. The silence that followed was deafening. A vacuum where the sound of an engine should have been. For a second, nothing happened. Then Betty's door flew open. Ryan practically fell out. His face a mask of pure panic. The game was over. Now came the consequences. Ryan, I said as I closed the gap. Where's your partner? He bolted. He helifed. Mom said if it went bad, run. Porch lights blinked on like dominoes. A dog barked twice, then committed to the bit. Tommy stepped out in a bathrobe and Crocs, holding a garden hose like he might baptize the kid on the spot. Should I a spray deterrent? Negative, I said, matching Ryan's angle. We're keeping it boring. He cut left. I cut shorter. When he finally tripped, I guided him down and kept my voice flat. Hands where I can see them. You're not hurt. You're just done. He shook under my knee. Please don't tell her I messed up. Buddy, I said. She told you to do the mess. A cheap flashlight jittered behind the hedge. The lookout had crept back, amplifier under his arm. Stop, Eikeled. Leave the box. Hands up, he froze. Eyes huge, then chose rabbit and bolted. The amplifier slipped, skittered across Tommy's walkway, and tapped a pink flamingo. Tommy, still in robe and Crocs, thumbed his hose and gave the key to polite miss like he was watering bad decisions. Hey, conservation hours, he scolded. The kid yelped and vanished between shrubs, leaving the gear in a trail of shoe prints and mulch. Hell ended on the soft grass of my neighbor Tommy's yard, right next to a plastic flamingo. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had him pinned before he could even process what had happened. One knee on his back, applying just enough pressure to keep him still. One hand controlling his arms. It was over in less than 30 seconds from the moment I left the house. He wasn't fighting. The brief burst of adrenaline was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. He was just a kid trembling under my hand. Don't move, I said, my voice low and steady. I wasn't yelling. There was no need to yell. The bag he'd been carrying, a simple black backpack, had flown off his shoulder when he went down. It lay on the grass a few feet away, slightly open. Inside, I could see the edge of the relay amplifier box. And next to it, a cell phone. Its screen lit up. It was buzzing, vibrating against the contents of the bag. A new text message had just arrived. The sender was listed as Mom. The message on the screen was clear, even in the dim moonlight. It read, "Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan." I looked down at the scared, foolish kid pinned beneath me, and then at the phone glowing with evidence from his own mother. This wasn't just about a stolen truck anymore. Simple version, box steals the door. My switch kills the fuel. Camera sees the faces. Texts prove the plan. This was a conspiracy orchestrated by Karen Spruce with her own son as the pawn, and she had just handed me everything I needed to burn her whole world to the ground. The arrival of the police was quiet and professional. No sirens, no flashing lights. Officer Davis and Officer Reed pulled up in their cruiser, its engine a low rumble in the night. They had been waiting just as we'd arranged, parked 2 streets over, standing by on their radio and waiting for my go text. I had dialed 911 the second Ryan was on the ground, but I'd also sent a one-word text to Davis's cell. Go. He knew exactly what it meant. While Miller put a shaking Ryan into the back of the cruiser, not in cuffs but clearly detained, Davis came over to me. He surveyed the scene. The dead truck under the streetlight, the backpack on the lawn, the plastic flamingo standing silent witness. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. You okay, Tim? I'm fine, I said. He's not hurt, just scared. Davis nodded slowly. Good. Let's do this by the book. Every last detail, and that's when Team Miller went into high gear. It was like watching a well-oiled machine. Deborah came out of the house, a laptop in one hand and a portable hard drive in the other. She didn't look at Ryan or the police car. She went straight to Betty. Dashcam footage is secure, she announced, plugging a cable into the camera mounted behind the rearview mirror. I have a clear shot of him getting in, the truck rolling, and the engine cutting out. Audio picked up him muttering when it died. She moved to the front porch and interfaced with the Ring camera. Porch camera has the approach. 2 individuals, one stays back in the shadows. The other, clearly the suspect, approaches the vehicle. I can probably pull a decent facial image from the frames when he passes under the porch light. Phil emerged from the garage. He wasn't a kid anymore. He was part of the mission. He carried a large clear evidence bag. He handed it to Officer Davis. Kill switch remote, he said simply. Davis took it, tagged it, and placed it on the hood of his cruiser. My job was the physical evidence. With gloved hands provided by Miller, I carefully picked up Ryan's backpack. I handed it to Davis, who placed it on the trunk of the cruiser to be inventoried. The scene was methodical, almost clinical. The relay amplifier, the relay transmitter, a pair of cheap gloves, and the centerpiece, the glowing cell phone. Davis handled the phone as if it were a live grenade. Using a pen, he navigated the screen. He didn't need a warrant to look at the message on the lock screen. It was in plain view. He read it aloud for his body camera. He powered the phone down and bagged it for a digital warrant. Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan. Later, forensics pulled the full thread under a warrant. Wait until 1:30. Everyone will be asleep. That was from Mom. The amplifier has to be close to the front door. Walk past slowly. Another one from her. Just get it to the corner. I'll meet you there. Don't turn the lights on. It was a step-by-step instruction manual for Grand Theft Auto written by a mother to her son. Deborah stood beside me watching. She coached him through the whole thing, she murmured, her voice tight with a cold fury I rarely heard. She put her own kid up to this. Officer Davis looked up from the phone, his face grim. This is way beyond a joyride, Tim. This is conspiracy to commit a felony. Using a minor to commit a crime is a whole other level of stupid. He looked at our house, at the cameras, at the truck sitting perfectly positioned under the light. He looked at Deborah downloading data and Phil calmly identifying the tools of the crime. Then he looked at me. You knew they were coming. It wasn't a question. I had a feeling, I said, my voice flat. Karen Spruce made it clear she wanted the truck. I just connected the dots. You did more than that, Davis said, a hint of respect in his voice. You documented everything. You built a perfect airtight case for us. Most of the time we get a frantic call about a truck that's already gone. We've never had a victim set up the crime scene for us. He picked up the phone again. With this text history and the footage from your cameras, the state attorney's office is going to love this. The thought of it escalating that high sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about a pushy neighbor anymore. This was serious, and it was far from over. Karen Spruce had started a war, but she had no idea who she was fighting. She thought she was dealing with a quiet mechanic. She was about to find out she was dealing with a family that knew how to fight back. The next 48 hours were a strange mix of legal procedure and simmering tension. Ryan was released back into his parents' custody, which was standard for a minor with no prior record. But he was now officially part of a felony investigation. The Spruce house went dark. The curtains were drawn. The cars didn't move. It was like a tomb. They were hiding, probably talking to lawyers, trying to figure out how to spin a story where a mother texting her son instructions on how to steal a truck was some kind of misunderstanding. I knew Karen's next move wouldn't be direct. She was too clever for that. She'd tried the criminal route and failed spectacularly. Now she would turn to the weapon she knew best, bureaucracy. She would use the HOA, her own little kingdom, to attack me. The first shot was fired on Thursday morning. I was in the garage recalibrating the timing on Betty's engine when my neighbor Tommy came jogging up the driveway, his face flushed with alarm. Tommy is one of those guys who knows everything that happens on the street. He's the neighborhood watch, the gossip chain, and the welcome wagon all rolled into one. Tim, you gotta see this. Hep and Ted. There's a tow truck down the street. It's a big one. One of those flatbeds. I wiped my hands on a rag and followed him out to the street. Sure enough, a massive, greasy-looking flatbed tow truck was rumbling toward my house. The driver, a heavy-set man with a stained t-shirt and a bored expression, was consulting a clipboard. He pulled to a stop right in front of Betty. Karen swept up in a pink suit, finger already jabbing. At the curb, her black SUV idled, Ryan in the driver's seat, hands glued to the wheel. Two uniforms lingered at the corner, watching the circus form before it started. I felt that familiar cold knot form in my stomach. I walked up to the driver's window. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice even. The driver grunted, not looking at me. "Got a call to tow an abandoned vehicle. Black Ford F-150. This it?" He gestured with his thumb toward my truck. My truck parked in my driveway. "Abandoned," I said, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. "She's parked 10 FT from my front door. I was just working on her. She's registered to this address. I've got the title right inside." The driver finally looked at me. He saw the grease on my hands, the tools on the fender, the clean driveway. His bored expression flickered with confusion, then a dawning suspicion. He looked back at his clipboard. Call came in from the Homeowners Association. Said it was in violation. Leaking fluids, expired tags, constitutes a junk vehicle under Covenant 7B. I almost laughed. It was brilliant in a slimy, despicable way. She was trying to have my truck legally stolen in broad daylight. "My tags are good until next June," I said, pointing to the sticker on the license plate. "And she's not leaking a drop. I rebuilt that engine myself. She's cleaner than your truck." The driver's eyes narrowed. He was a working guy. He knew the difference between a project and a piece of junk. He also knew the smell of a setup. "Let me see the work order," I said. He hesitated, then handed me the clipboard. The authorization was signed at the bottom. Karen Spruce, HOA president. The reason cited was multiple neighbor complaints in violation of aesthetic code. It was all lies. "This is harassment," I said, simply handing the clipboard back. "The woman who signed this is currently the subject of a felony investigation for trying to have this exact truck stolen 2 nights ago." You tow this truck. You become an accessory. You'll be impounding evidence in an active criminal case. The driver's face went pale under his sunburn. The words felony investigation and evidence have a way of clearing things up. He snatched the clipboard back and stared at the signature. The lady on the phone sounded real official. He muttered more to himself than to me. She's very good at sounding official, I said. It's her superpower. Karen pointed at me and raised her voice for every mic. Community standards will prevail. The patrol car at the corner eased forward a length. I crossed my arms and didn't move. He looked at Betty, then back at me. He looked at my house, a well-kept home with a tidy lawn. Nothing about the scene screamed abandoned vehicle. He was being used, he knew it. With a heavy sigh, he put his truck in gear. Look, man, I just go where they tell me. But this ain't right. He tore the work order off the clipboard, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it onto his passenger seat. His company still had the digital order back at the yard. That mattered later. Karen hit speakerphone and dialed a board member. Martin, note this. Non-compliance, hostile posture, fines doubled. The driver rolled his eyes. Ma'am, I'm refusing the load on camera. If you've got a problem, have your lawyer call mine. Tommy shaded his eyes with one hand. Martin, buddy, blink twice if you need help. Deborah lifted our phone. Karen, you're being recorded for our records as well? Karen's tone went sugar cold. Community standards will prevail. The flatbed hissed into reverse. Not today. They won't, the driver said, and eased away. My dispatcher is going to be mad, but I ain't getting involved in some police thing. Sorry for the trouble. He backed the big truck up, swung it around, and rumbled off down the street, leaving a faint scent of diesel in the air. I stood there for a long moment, watching him go. Tommy let out a low whistle. Wow, that woman is something else. Yeah, I said, my jaw tight. She is. This changed things. This was an escalation. It proved her intent. It showed a pattern of harassment. It was also incredibly stupid, filing a false report, misusing her authority as HO president. She was digging her own grave, and she was doing it with a shovel. I walked back inside, past Deborah, who had watched the whole thing from the window. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone and dialed the number on Officer Davis's card. When he answered, I said, Davis, it's Tim Miller. She's trying it again, and this time I think she just broke a few more laws. The call to Officer Davis set a new chain of events in motion. He told me to sit tight, not to engage with Karen, and that he was making a call. An hour later, my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. Mr. Miller, this is Investigator Alvarez with the State Attorney's Office. Her voice was businesslike, sharp, and carried an unmistakable note of authority. Officer Davis has brought me up to speed on your situation. I've reviewed his preliminary report, the evidence logs, and the text messages from the suspect's phone. What you have is compelling. What happened this morning with the tow truck, that's a gift. I explained the entire encounter to her. Every detail, from Tommy's warning to the driver crumpling the work order. She was silent for a moment when I finished. She's arrogant, Alvarez said finally. That's good for us. Arrogant people make mistakes. They get chatty. Mr. Miller, how would you feel about helping us encourage her to make one more mistake? I knew what she was asking. They wanted me to be bait. What do you have in mind, I asked. We need to connect Karen Spruce's desire for the truck directly to her illegal actions. The texts are great, but they're from her to her son. We want to get her in her own voice admitting her scheme. I want you to call her. We'll set up a pretext. You're going to tell her you're scared. You're going to say this has gotten out of hand. The police are involved and you just want it all to go away. Then you're going to offer to sell her the truck for a ridiculously low price. Say $500 cash just to make this whole problem disappear. It was a classic sting. Put the target at ease, make them feel like they're in control, and let them talk their way into a jail cell. She'll be suspicious. I said she's not stupid. That's why you have to sell it, Alvarez replied. You're a family man. You're worried about your son, your wife. You're not a tough guy. You're just a mechanic who's in over his head. You have to sound intimidated. Can you do that? I thought about my family, about Phil having to wire a kill switch and Deborah running surveillance from our kitchen. The anger was there, cold and hard, but I could bury it. In the Navy, I'd learned to be whatever the mission required. I can do that, I said. The next afternoon, Investigator Alvarez and a technician from her office were sitting at my kitchen table. The tech attached a small device to our landline phone. It wasn't a recorder in the traditional sense. It was a secure transmitter that would broadcast the call directly to a certified recording device at their office. It was all perfectly legal, a one-P party consent call since I was a party to the conversation. Our state is one-party consent. Alvarez cited the statute before we started. Alvarez prepped me. Remember, Tim, you're the victim. You're reaching out to her. Let her lead the conversation. We don't want it to sound like entrapment. We just want her to confirm what we already know. Mention the attempted theft. Mention the tow truck. Frame it as things that have you spooked. All you want is peace. The 500i is just a way to make it all final. My heart was pounding as I dialed the number. This felt more nerve-wracking than the stakeout. This was psychological. Deborah stood across the room, giving Amy a small, encouraging nod. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, Karen picked up. Hello. Her voice was clipped, wary. Karen, it's Tim Miller. There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. What do you want? She finally said, her tone icy. Look, I started, letting a slight tremor enter my voice. I think we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten out of control. I took a breath. My son is shaken up. My wife is a wreck, and now the police are involved. I had to talk to detectives, and then this morning. This morning you sent a tow truck. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said quickly. Too quickly. Karen, please, I pleaded, laying it on thick. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want this to be over. The truck, it's just a truck. It's not worth all this. It's not worth my family's peace of mind. Another pause. I could feel her smelling the blood in the water. She thought I was breaking. What are you proposing, Tim? She asked, her voice softening, shifting from defensive to predatory. This was the moment. I'll sell it to you, I said, the words tasting like ash. For Ryan, I know how much he wanted it. I don't want your money. Just give me $500 for my trouble and it's yours. We can write up a simple bill of sale. You get the truck and you call off the dogs. The HOA complaints, the other stuff. We just go back to being neighbors. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could picture her, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. She thought she'd won. She thought her campaign of intimidation had worked. Well, she said, her voice now oozing that fake sugary sweetness I hated. I suppose that's a very reasonable solution. It's a shame we had to have all this misunderstanding. My Ryan was just being an impulsive boy and the tow truck. That was just an HOA matter, a clerical error. But yes, for the sake of neighborhood peace, I think we can agree to your terms. It was everything Alvarez wanted. She hadn't admitted to ordering the theft, but she had linked the misunderstanding with her son to the tow truck incident and the sale of the truck. She was agreeing to a deal to end the conflict she had started. Alvarez, listening on a headset, caught my eye and gave a sharp, decisive nod. We had her. Thank you, Karen, I said, my voice thick with fake relief. I really appreciate it. Of course, Tim, she purred. Anything for a neighbor. I hung up the phone, my hand slick with sweat. The room was silent. Deborah let out a breath she'd been holding. Investigator Alvarez removed her headset, a grim smile on her face. A clerical error, she said, shaking her head. Let's see how that holds up in front of a judge. Karen never realized Alvarez had been on standby since night one. That ignorance was about to cost her. The hook was set. Now all we had to do was reel her in. The week leading up to the quarterly HOA meeting was the quietest we'd had since Karen Spruce declared war on my truck. It was the calm before the storm. The Spruce house remained a fortress of drawn blinds. Karen, however, was busy on the neighborhood email list. She sent out a cheerful, professionally worded agenda for the meeting. Tucked between discussion of new pet waste disposal stations and annual flower bed budget was a new item. Resolution of outstanding property violations and community standards. It was aimed directly at me. She was preparing the battlefield, planning to control the narrative. She didn't know I was preparing too. Investigator Alvarez had been clear. We would let the meeting happen. Her team would be there, blending in with a recording device to capture the official minutes and anything else of interest. My job was to present my case, not as an accuser, but as a concerned resident. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place the day before the meeting. The tow truck driver, on the advice of his company's lawyer, had given a formal sworn statement to Investigator Alvarez, complete with a copy of the fraudulent work order Karen had authorized. The net was closing and she was about to walk right into it. The community center meeting room was exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. Beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed, and the faint smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. About 30 neighbors were scattered in the uncomfortable plastic chairs. Neighbor Tommy gave me a worried look and a thumbs up as I walked in with Deborah and Phil. We sat in the front row. Karen Spruce sat at a long table at the front of the room, flanked by the other two board members, a nervous-looking accountant, and a woman who seemed terrified of her. Karen was in her element. She radiated authority, her voice crisp and commanding as she moved through the agenda items. She was a master of procedure, using Robert's rules of order like a weapon to shut down anyone who rambled or disagreed with her. Finally, she arrived at her special agenda item. Next, she announced, her eyes sweeping the room and landing on me. We have the resolution of outstanding property violations. As you all know, we have covenants in place to protect our property values and maintain the aesthetic harmony of our community. She paused for dramatic effect. Unfortunately, some residents believe these rules do not apply to them, specifically the issue of junk or inoperable vehicles. We have received multiple complaints about a certain black Ford truck. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew she was talking about me. This was a public shaming. I've spoken to the resident in question, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension, and have even made a generous offer to help him dispose of the vehicle. When that failed, the HOA was forced to take official action, which was unfortunately misinterpreted. I raised my hand. Karen, I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through her monologue. Since it's my truck, may I have a moment to address these complaints? She couldn't refuse without looking like a tyrant. She smiled thinly. Of course, Tim, the floor is yours. I didn't stand up. I just turned slightly in my chair to face the other residents. I had a small projector set up on the table in front of me, aimed at the blank wall behind Karen. I think there's been some confusion about what's been happening with my truck, I said. So I'd like to clear it up. I find that video is often clearer than words. I clicked a button on my laptop. The first video started to play on the wall. Quick note, I said into the mic. This meeting's being recorded for the state attorney's office. In the back, Investigator Alvarez lifted a hand. Karen went a shade paler. It was the crystal clear footage from my Ring camera. The room was silent as they watched two figures in hoodies sneak up to my house. They saw Ryan Spruce jimmy the relay box. They heard the soft thunk of the lock. Gasps rippled through the room. Is that you on those texts, Karen? A neighbor asked. Because it sounds a lot like, do you have it? The accountant at her table whispered. Madam President, maybe we should. Quiet, Martin, she snapped into the mic, feedback squealing. This is a smear, Tommy cupped his hands. Quick poll. Who here authorized the abandoned tow on a truck that moves? A dozen hands went up. None of them hers. Deborah clicked to the still of the forge work order with her signature. A murmur rolled the room. Karen jabbed a finger at me. You've been waging war on this board since you moved in. I smiled. Karen, I rebuilt a carburetor last night. That was my war, Alvarez from the back row. Scribbled and said to no one. And there's our on-record confirmation. Next, I played the dash cam footage, the interior of my truck, Ryan's panicked face illuminated for a second, the silent roll down the driveway, and the sudden, inexplicable stop. I let it play. Then I put up a still frame, a high-resolution image of texts on Ryan's phone, messages from Karen to him. Is it done? Do you have it? The murmuring in the room grew louder. People were turning to look at Karen, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. Karen was on her feet, her face a blotchy, furious red. This is a Raj. This is an invasion of my son's privacy. This is edited footage. It's slander, she shrieked, losing all composure. Your son was attempting to commit a felony, Karen, I said, my voice still level. And you were coaching him. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You have been harassing my family. I have been trying to solve this problem peacefully. I even took official HOA action to have that piece of junk towed for being abandoned. And that was it. That was the mistake. The fiddle slip? In her rage, she had just confessed on the record in a room full of witnesses and in front of a state investigator's recording device to filing the fraudulent tow report. She had admitted to using her HOA power as a weapon in a personal dispute. Investigator Alvarez, sitting in the back row dressed in a polo shirt and khakis, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was done. Karen was so blinded by her fury she didn't even see the doors at the back of the room open. She was still ranting about aesthetic harmony and property values when Officer Davis and Officer Reed stepped inside. They weren't in their patrol uniforms. They were in suits. And they were not alone. Two other Plainlow detectives were with them. The room fell into a sudden, complete silence. Karen's tirade choked off in her throat. Her eyes widened. her face draining of all color as she saw the four figures walking slowly, deliberately down the center aisle toward her. The trap hadn't just been sprung. The cage door had just been slammed shut, and she was on the wrong side of it. The transformation of the room was instantaneous. One moment it was a tense HOA meeting. The next it was a crime scene. The air crackled with a new kind of authority, one that had nothing to do with lawn maintenance or paint colors. Officer Davis held up a folded piece of paper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every eye was on him. "Karen Spruce," he said, his voice carrying easily in the stunned silence. "I have a warrant for your arrest. Issued at the request of the state attorney's office," Davis added, unfolding the paper. The room froze. The judge had signed it hours earlier. Her on-record admission triggered service. A collective gasp went through the room. Neighbor Tommy's jaw was literally hanging open. Karen stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. The arrogance, the condescending authority, it all just melted away, leaving behind a woman who looked small and scared and utterly defeated. The charges are conspiracy to commit grand theft auto, attempted grand theft auto, using a minor in the commission of a felony, and filing a false police report. Davis continued, ticking them off in a calm, methodical cadence. He wasn't gloating, he was just doing his job. One of the plainclothes detectives stepped forward and spoke to her in a low voice, reading her Miranda rights. The other detective was already speaking to the other two board members, securing the HOA's records and meeting minutes as evidence. Miller came over to our family. "You all okay?" he asked quietly. Deborah nodded, her arm wrapped tightly around Phil's shoulders. Phil just watched, his expression serious, taking in the slow, grinding mechanics of justice. I felt a strange sense of detachment watching the scene unfold. There was no joy, no triumphant feeling of victory, just a grim, quiet satisfaction. This was the inevitable conclusion of her actions. It was physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. She had pushed, and this was the universe pushing back. While Karen was being discreetly handcuffed, her hands behind her back, Davis addressed the shocked residents. "I apologize for the interruption," he said. "As you've just heard, this is an active investigation. Another team is currently at the Spruce residence with a search warrant for all electronic devices. We believe there may be evidence of misuse of HOA funds and other instances of fraudulent activity that sent another shockwave through the crowd. The clerical error with the tow truck was likely just the tip of the iceberg. Who knew how many other residents she had bullied or fined unjustly, using her power to settle personal scores? They let a silent, ash-faced Karen out of the room. The meeting was over. People started talking at once, a confused, angry buzz filling the space. Several neighbors came over to me, clapping me on the shoulder, shaking my head in disbelief. "I knew she was a piece of work," one said, "but I never imagined this." Tommy came over, his face pale. "Holy cow, Tim, that was something else. You had it all planned." "I just collected the facts, Tommy," I said. She did the rest. Investigator Alvarez approached me as the room began to clear out. "Mr. Miller," she said, shaking my hand. Her handshake was firm, no nonsense. "Thank you for your cooperation. Your family's calm and methodical approach made this case. You gave us an airtight package. We couldn't have asked for more." "What happens now?" Deborah asked. "Now the legal system does its work," Alvarez said. "We have her confession on tape about the tow truck. We have the sworn statement from the driver. We have the text messages and we have the video. She'll likely be offered a plea deal. Ryan, because he's a minor and it's his first offense, will probably be offered a diversion program. He'll have to do community service counseling. He's lucky. His mother put him in a terrible position." She gave us a small, tired smile. "You should be proud of how you handled this. You defended your family and your property without breaking a single law. That's a rare thing these days." As we packed up our laptop and projector, I looked at the empty table where Karen had presided over her little kingdom. It was just a table. Her power had been an illusion built on intimidation and bluff. When confronted with simple, undeniable truth, it had crumbled into dust. We walked out of the community center and into the cool night air. The street was quiet. The war was over. Now came the long, slow work of finding peace. In the weeks after the arrest, a different quiet settled over the block. Soft, breathable. The Spruce place sprouted a discreet for sale sign. And after one last curtain twitch went dark. The state attorney moved fast. Faced with video, text, and the forged tow, Karen took a plea. Lesser counts, heavy fines, long probation, restitution to the HOA, and a permanent no-contact order with my family. Her HOA seat was vacated that day. Ryan entered diversion, community service, counseling, and a written apology. It read like a lawyer typed it, but Phil skimmed it, shrugged, and said, "Hope he does better next time." Then went back to calculus. The kid chose wrong. His mother loaded the choice. HOA fallout came quick. The remaining board resigned. A special meeting elected a clean slate. Somehow Tommy, Robe, Crocs, and all ended up president. First motion, audit every violation and fee issued under Karen. Half of them evaporated by sundown. By Friday, refund checks showed up in mailboxes. People started waving again. Conversations bounced from lawns instead of overgroup emails. That summer's block party was the biggest in years. Grills popping, kids racing bikes. Exactly the noise you miss when it's gone. At home, Deborah reclaimed the kitchen from wire tangles. Command post became dinner table again. Phil earned his license. For his first solo, he didn't grab Deborah's sedan. He asked for Betty. I stood in the driveway and watched him roll away. Steady hands at 10 and 2 and felt it in my chest. This wasn't a truck anymore. It was our banner. I kept the kill switch. I added a Faraday pouch for the keys, a master battery cutoff, and a habit. Every few months, Deborah sweeps the undercarriage with a detector to make sure no one's tracking us. Sometimes I throw a wheel lock on for good measure. Not paranoia practice. The question this whole mess asked me was simple. How far do you go to guard your own? Far enough inside the lines. Use your head before your hands. Use the law, not payback. Justice isn't about winning. It's about resetting the level. Tonight, the sky is clean and cool. I'm on the porch with a cold drink. Betty sits in the driveway, her gloss black paint drinking moonlight like ink. Deborah leans on my shoulder. From the garage comes the soft click-click of Phil's ratchet and a low whistle off-key. Down the block, a dog barks, reconsiders, and quits. That street feels taller somehow. This is what we fought for. Not chrome, not points on a scorecard. Just quiet, earned the right way, wrapped around the people I love. That's everything. And it's worth defending every